Hey there, I'm Andy McAfee. I'm a voiceover artist, and today I have a special treat for you. I've asked one of my bestest buddies in voiceover, Mocean Melvin, to come to my home studio and show you what it's actually like to do a voiceover audition. He is an expert in narration, so he's brought 3 scripts, different shows, different types of reads, and he's going to talk you through his audition process. And then afterwards, he and I are going to sit down here and we're going to talk a little bit about how he actually got there. How does he know how to audition for a narration? How does he know how to change the character of his read? How did he go from, I really wish I could be a voiceover artist, to where he is now in my studio? So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you back here after his auditions.
All right, so here's an example of a narration audition. I got 3 of these today, so I'm going to be doing these 3 guys. The first one is called Shark Croc Showdown. It's a Shark Week show. I've already done my prep on this, so I'm going to go ahead and let it rip. Australia, home to some of the biggest sharks on Earth, and they're not alone. A saltwater crocodile. As saltwater crocodiles move out to sea, they're heading into shark territory, and they're clashing over sea turtles. Now, an expedition heads to the Coburg Peninsula, 170 miles northeast of Darwin, Australia, to uncover what's going on. Okay, so that was a good run through. So now that I've got the story a little bit better, I know how to work my mouth around these words. I'm going to do it one more time. Australia, home to some of the biggest sharks on Earth, and they're not alone. As saltwater crocodiles move out to sea, they're heading into shark territory, and they're clashing over sea turtles. Now, an expedition heads to the Coburg Peninsula, 170 miles northeast of Darwin, Australia, to uncover what's going on. So that was good. I felt good about that. So I'm going to... Should I do a take 2? No. Okay, so feeling good about that one. This next one is called The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer. It's a History Channel show, and it is about the infamous serial killer, the Zodiac. So this is a little bit different. This is a little bit more narrative. So I'm going to go ahead and run this guy off for you. The Zodiac Killer, America's most infamous unidentified serial killer. Seen only in glimpses, heard only in his taunting letters. He said he hid his name in his code. A bizarre set of letters and symbols that has beaten every attempt to decode it. Until now. 2 top investigators, with unprecedented access to police files, will feed clues and leads to an all-star team of codebreakers. So that was pretty good. I sort of started with the very understated intro, and then I could see there was a turn through my investigation into all of the visuals to kind of bring the energy up a little bit when after the open and when it starts getting into what the show is actually about. So that's what I did on that one. And now we're going to move on to something a little bit lighter. It's Me or the Dog. This is a show I did back in the aughts, the 2000s. So it's been a while, but this is a nice break from the other 2. This one's a lot more upbeat. On this episode of It's Me or the Dog, Victoria meets Victor Wirtz and his recently adopted dogs, 1-year-old pit bull Halston and 2-year-old pit bull mix, Rocket. As a rescue volunteer, Victor is used to helping dogs, but now he's the only one that needs saving. A pair of puppies have destroyed Victor's apartment, scared away visitors, and ruined his relationships. Little rusty on this one. We're going to go ahead and do it again now that I got back into this and my mind is reaching a decade back to remember what it was I did on this show. On this episode of It's Me or the Dog, Victoria meets Victor Wirtz and his recently adopted dogs, 1-year-old pit bull Halston and 2-year-old pit bull mix Rocket. As a rescue volunteer, Victor is used to helping dogs, but now he's the one that needs saving. The pair of puppies have destroyed Victor's apartment, scared away visitors, and ruined his relationships. So that was it. I would normally send a couple takes of each one just to give a little bit of variety, show some range. And otherwise, there you go. Send them off. Money in the bank.
All right. So you got to see Mocean Melvin in action in my studio. His may differ a little bit.
Not much.
Okay.
So we have the same booth, same mic, but the audio interface in the computer is different.
Yeah, but you get the general idea. I just wanted to show what the audition process looks like. So let's talk about how you got there. How did you get to this final product, the way that you auditioned? Where did it start?
You mean, how far back do you want me to go? I mean, I could do a quick recap of my entire life.
Time. Well, let's just start with the moment where you transitioned from whatever you were doing in life to, I'm going to be a voiceover artist and I'm going to do A, B, and C to get there.
Right. Okay. So I went to school for theater, but I was always interested in voice, and that was just a feeling. This is sort of like the twinkle in my eye of, voiceover, future voiceover. So my first job out of college was at a radio station. So I worked there for a year, or I wrote and produced and voiced my own commercials.
Okay.
But those were just commercials. And then when I moved to LA, I started studying more with the local coaches here.
Okay.
And then once I got an agent and started working, I was just doing commercial.
Okay.
But when it comes to narration specifically, that was, documentaries and documentary series, History Channel, Discovery Channel, National Geographic. Those were part of my life as far back as soon as I could watch television, because that's all my dad watched was documentaries. So I watched a lot of those. I got so into them to the point where I knew who the narrators were. I studied what they did. And this was before I even was thinking about having a voiceover career. Just making you choke with this story. You're getting...
This is really hard work. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
It's a little hot and dusty in LA.
It is.
Anyway, it's not that I wasn't interested. I just had a cough that needed to come out.
Yeah, of course.
So you were really interested in narration your whole life, and you were starting to sort of emulate people you heard on TV.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew who Mike Rowe was, and Alec Baldwin. Like I didn't know that Alec Baldwin had ever done any narration. I didn't know him as anything other than an actor, and then I discovered he narrates, and he's really good at it. And Edward Herman and J.V. Martin. These are just guys that I knew who they were because I loved what they did. So I started doing voiceover, but I was just doing commercial stuff. And so once I got a foothold in the commercial world, I knew that my agent would actually listen to me. He would take my call and listen to me when I wanted to tell him, hey, I'm really interested in doing narration. I love documentaries. This is something I want to do. I think I could be good at it. So please consider me for stuff that comes through. And they did. They were great. They started giving me voice narration auditions, and so I just started practicing with actual copy.
Okay.
Instead of just like watching a documentary and then like pausing it and repeating what they just said the way they said it, and then pressing play again. And so that's when I really in earnest started to study the niche, the craft within the craft that is narration.
So it's a different story about how you got into the union and how you got an agent, but we're just going to focus on how you got from telling your agent, I'm interested in narration, and that very first audition and what that was like for you to how you got to the place where you are now when you get to the booth.
Yeah, so that's a weird thing in LA because there's no, that I know of, any classes that teach narration. There are plenty of commercial classes, there's plenty of animation classes, and I think that the reason is there's a demand for those classes.
Okay.
Because people know that commercials are the, it's the way in, the lion's share of the work is there, and that's what agents are looking for, a good commercial read mostly. And then there's the animation because everybody wants to do animation because that's fun,
Yeah.
And
you can be famous.
And you can be famous.
That's what people think about animation, in my experience.
But it's also the hardest thing to get into, and it's the most work. But anyway, no, I particularly wanted to do narration, and so there were no classes, and so I had to teach myself. So basically, the thing that I realized really early on is that narration is more narrative. It is a story, and so I decided just right off the bat, I was like, the most important thing that I need to figure out when I sit down to do an audition and when I'm working on this is to tell the story. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, you can do that in the tone that you use, it's like, am I reading a bedtime story or am I reading a story about a serial killer?
We heard that in the 3 different auditions that you chose to perform for us today.
Right. Am I talking about sharks and crocodiles ripping each other's throats out, or am I talking about cute little doggies, that are getting trained? But there's also a lot more to consider in terms of your phrasing, in terms of the your pace, the way that you use pauses, and also the fact that any story has a beginning, middle, and end. And scripts for documentaries and documentary series are written the same way. A typical 1 hour historical documentary or documentary series has an open, which is an introduction to the show, and then it's got 6 acts. And within each act, there's an open to the act, and then there's the middle of the act, and then there's the end of the act. And then sometimes a teaser for the next act.
Okay.
So you need to be able to identify the anatomy, what I like to call the anatomy.
And this is all the prep work you do before you even get into the booth, right?
Absolutely.
You break it down into beginning, middle, end, who,
Yes.
what, when, where. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really important part of figuring out what the story is, and this is what anyone who's ever done any acting training is gonna understand. It's the who, what, when, where, why.
Okay.
Who are these people, or what is the subject of this? What are they doing? Where are they? Why are they doing it? All of those are really important to be able to understand. And if you aren't given those in the script or in the specs, you need to make that up for yourself.
Okay.
Like, it needs to be real in your mind. For me, I need visuals. I need auditory. I need what does this smell like? Is there a certain kind of music that is going to go along with this kind of a thing? What is the energy? What is the pace? And so that is something that you can usually glean just from the script itself. But if you're lucky, if you're unlucky, all you get is words with no description, sometimes not even specs. It's just
and specs,
read this
just
script.
for people who don't know, is usually a producer or a client will put just a brief description of the feel that they want of the read, right?
Yeah,
That's what specs
right.
are.
The specifications of what exactly they're looking for. It could be like the character breakdown, you could call it as well. And so, but it goes so much beyond just what the character is. So once you figure out the story, you figure out your who, what, when, where, why, then you start to get as much information as you possibly can from that point. A lot of times these scripts will, I'm trying to show an example here. you'll get this sort of split script where this isn't actually a good example, but it looks like this, where one side is the audio or
Use your imagination.
Yeah.
You have to do that a lot in voiceover.
It's true. So this is like the voiceover and the SOTs, which are sound on tapes. They're also called nat sound or natural sound, but this is basically the audio side, and then over here, the video side. So if you're lucky enough to get one of those kinds of scripts, you get the video, you get the images. And so that starts to help create that picture in your mind of what this story is.
So talk about your very first couple of auditions. Did you do that for your very first few auditions for narration?
No, absolutely not. I just tried to copy people that I knew.
How did you get there then? How did you know to do that, to start doing that?
Well,
For yourself.
You know, a lot of people say if you take classes, you get coaching, sometimes even your agents will say this, is that you don't want to copy anybody else. You don't want to try to sound like anybody else. And that's true, but it can be a very useful tool if you're trying to learn a specific skill. It can be a very useful tool in learning how to create your own style because it expands your mind.
Okay.
So, you know, my read is got influences from Mike Rowe, Alec Baldwin, Edward Herman, Liev Schreiber, you know, like all those guys. But I don't sound like any of them.
Okay.
I take, you know, Mike Rowe's phrasing and Alec Baldwin's tone and Liev Schreiber's gravitas, you know, like, and so that's all come together, and it's slowly evolved over the years.
Okay.
You know, when I first started, it was pretty mechanical, you know. And then as time went on, as I did more work, as I made more mistakes, as I listened to other people, as I learned, you know, what it was like to work with different directors and writers, it really started to become, you know, my own voice.
Okay.
But that took years for me to
So
get there.
that's really good advice is, you know, when you're just beginning and you want to get a feel for the genre in which you're interested in, narration in this case, go copy the experts. At least get that feeling in your body of somebody else's pacing, of somebody else's tone. Just feel what that feels like and keep practicing. This job is a job. They don't call it a job for nothing. You have to keep putting yourself out there, just doing, and hopefully that gets you into your own process.
Yeah, I think a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that, well, I talk every day. I talk. I mean, I'm talking right now. What is
So
it?
easy.
Like, it's so easy.
We all do it.
But really, you know, I think it's more like learning how to play an instrument. Because, you know, like, I can pick up a guitar and make it make noise. But it would take me years to get to the point where I'm competing with the best in the business. And that's the thing about voiceover. When you're put into the talent pool, there's no minor leagues. You don't start out competing with people who aren't quite as good at, or they're just getting started. You're right off the bat, like, you're pitching against, like, the major guys who've been doing this, the professionals. So you need to, you know, when you show up on the scene, you gotta bring your A game.
And when you first started in this business in general, you were actually in LA. You were a server. You were working catering.
Yeah.
While you were practicing your craft.
I did. I was a typical actor. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, you're an actor. Which restaurant? And you know, so yeah, that's what I did. I worked for a while. I was working as a PA at some post-production houses.
Okay.
And I had some fun experiences. I worked at this place called Ignition Creative, and they're a trailer house. And they were doing trailers, and you know, they had this whole library of demos of guys that they used. So I was listening to Howard Parker and Ashton Smith and Don LaFontaine, God rest his soul. And, you know, trying to be like those guys. And they, you know, I begged them to get me on a scratch. And a scratch is basically a temp track that the producers will send to their clients just to give them an idea of the visuals so that they just have some voiceover. Usually it'll be an editor or something like that, but I begged them to let me do it. And I went in there to read, and they laughed me out of the edit bay. It was a really embarrassing experience. But I was, you know, I was in my early 20s, and I was trying to sound like Don LaFontaine. You know what I mean? Like, that just wasn't going to happen.
But that's a really good story, and this is why I wanted to have you as my guinea pig for this series. Is I just really want people to understand that it's not overnight, and all of those stories are big fantasies.
Yeah, they
and
are.
This is a job just like anything else, and it takes a while to practice and get good at your craft and find your own voice within this industry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, Mo, and for sharing with us your own personal audition process, because I just find it fascinating. Everybody has their own.
My pleasure.
I enjoyed seeing it live and in person, and I hope you did too.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for watching.
Bye-bye.